I'm Becca Williams, joined today by the Director of Marketing and Communications of the Inn, Dana Lopez. Dana, thank you for taking time to talk with me today. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So I want to start off asking if you could give a little bit of an overview of what the Inn is and just how you operate as an organization.
Absolutely. Well, there's many people at Hofstra who are very familiar with what we do at the Inn, but for those who are not, the Inn is a nonprofit organization, and our basic goal when it comes down to it is to serve hungry and homeless Long Islanders. And we do that through a few programs. Some have been in existence since we began 38 years ago, and some are fairly newer. We do that through the largest soup kitchen on Long Island, which is the Mary Brennan Inn, which is behind me. We also have directly next door to the Mary Brennan Inn, we have a resource center and clothing boutique called the Center for Transformative Change, which is a very long name, but we do lovingly call it the CTC. One of the ways that you can think about how we provide our services, if you think about the soup kitchen providing basic needs, food, temporary shelter, at a certain point, clothing and an option to take a shower, grab a hot meal, that kind of thing. The Resource Center next door, CTC, focuses more on the next level of services. So not as much basic needs, but more of housing, furniture. We have a computer lab where people used to be able to come in and search for jobs. Downstairs is a clothing boutique. They're able to get clothing when many of them don't have the option or the resources in order to do that. So that's what the CTC does, sort of in a nutshell. We also provide housing. So we do have emergency shelters for formerly homeless individuals and families. And we also have a long-term housing program where we provide affordable housing to those who enter into our program with the intention of leaving our program one day. So we provide them with services while they're with us so that they can eventually become self-sufficient. And so that's what the Inn does with there's a lot of different things going on at any given moment.
Yeah, many different programs and services, which we'll get into in a minute. But first, I wanted to ask, because you did mention the Inn did begin as a soup kitchen and then expanded into all of these different programs like emergency shelters and housing programs. Did the Inn notice like a need in the community and adapt to it? And what factors contributed to this like huge growth as an organization?
Yes, and that's a really great question because our roots lie at Hofstra. I'm not sure if you knew that, but in 1983, there was a chaplain at Hofstra named Michael Moran, and he used to take a group of students to Brooklyn weekly to serve hot meals at a soup kitchen in Brooklyn. And the story goes that I've heard, because I wasn't there at the time, but the story goes that during one of these outings from Hofstra, on the way home, they saw someone in the Hofstra neighborhood eating out of a garbage can, and realized, it's a wonderful thing that we're doing, that we're going into Brooklyn and serving meals to people in need. However, there's a need right here in our backyard. And that was kind of the catalyst for the very first soup kitchen in Nassau County, which was the Mary Brennan Inn, not in this location, but it was around the corner, actually, on Front Street. And there were 30-something volunteer hopefuls that wanted to be a part of starting this soup kitchen that hadn't existed before. There were others in Suffolk, but there weren't any in Nassau. And the Mary Brennan Inn was born and did start as a soup kitchen. Very, very shortly after that, they realized that it's not just about food. They realized that people needed more in order to survive, in order to sort of get through their individual situations that they were put in, which were so many different ones. And then that's when we started opening shelters, and it sort of grew over time. So yeah, there was definitely, what the Inn has been trying to do since the very beginning is meet the need of the community.
Yeah, so kind of jumping forward, the Center for Transformative Change, the CTC, that's the Inn's newest facility, correct? It opened up a few years ago in 2016, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, you mentioned it includes a free clothing boutique. Could you explain a little bit about what that is? Because throughout my research with all of these different homeless shelters and interviewing these different representatives, I've never heard of something like that before.
Mhm. Well, we've always given clothing at the inn. So we used to have a clothing room in the soup kitchen in this building that you see behind me in the Mary Brennan Inn. When we opened up the CTC in 2016, there was space that we were able to move over our clothing boutique. And basically, what we try to do is we try to give items that are needed by guests. So we call anybody who utilizes our services is called our guest, and that's just upholding our ideal of giving people dignity and respect and love. We call them our guests. We invite them in, and we give them whatever we can to get through whatever situation they're in. One of those things is the fact that you realize that there are, people that are trying to maybe go to a job interview or go to work, or have children that go to school, or family members that just um, don't have the clothing that they need. So we try to do that. We get a lot of donations from very generous individuals, companies, community groups. A lot of people kind of, their kids are growing out of their clothing, or there's something that they don't wear anymore. And rather than throw it out, there's always somebody that is able to use it. So we take gently used clothing. We look through it, every single item, every article that's given to us, to make sure that it's acceptable to give to the guests. If we wouldn't wear it ourselves, we wouldn't give it out. So, and so that's basically where the clothing boutique comes in. And in addition to clothing, there are other small household items and things, that maybe some accessories. It kind of blew my mind. I always just thought it was day-to-day things, going to work, going to school. And our executive director, Jean Kelly, was talking to someone else once, and I overheard her say, sometimes people have to go to a funeral or to a wedding or to someplace where they just don't have the proper clothing to be presentable in certain places. And so that's where we come in. So we do outfit people for jobs and interviews, but we also outfit them for life, for just sort of everyday things that you might not necessarily realize. If you need something to go to something important, where would you get that if you don't have resources to purchase any clothing or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I never would have thought of. So it's wonderful you guys are able to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I saw on your website that the soup kitchen serves 300 to 400 guests a day, 5 days a week. So that's a lot of work and it's a lot of food. How are you guys able to balance all of it and be able to help so many people?
Well, it's interesting, because now when I answer these questions, I kind of have to answer them. The answer is pretty much the same, but I have to answer them sort of pre-pandemic and what's happening now. So this might be a good time to get into that. So prior to the pandemic, we used to serve, I guess you'd call it cafeteria style. We have a main dining room in the soup kitchen with tables and chairs that sat a little under 200 people at a time. Our volunteers would come in the morning, they'd start making a hot meal, and we would serve one meal a day to anyone who was outside. So we served between probably about 8:30 in the morning to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we'd close and we'd clean and prepare to do it all over again the next day, 5 days a week. We are normally not open on the weekends. So people used to come in, and in a 1 day span, we would have, like you said, 250, 300, 400 people that would come in, sit down, and have a hot meal. That is made possible by our supporters. We're a privately funded organization, so we rely on donations, monetary donations, and also donations of goods, items, food, clothing, things like that, in order to serve the meal. You can imagine how much it takes to be able to serve up to 400 people every single day. It definitely takes a lot. And we do have some very dedicated people and generous people that allow us to do that by giving of themselves. And we always need people to continue to do that so that we can continue to serve. Now, what's been happening since last March is we have not closed the door. Well, we've closed the door, but we haven't closed it all the way. Now, what we've been doing is we've been sort of offering a to-go option. So we pack up and assemble lunch bags or packaged hot meals, and we have this door behind me now. There's an older picture, but it now has a plexiglass booth with a window so that volunteers can safely provide a packaged meal that we've been assembling inside to anybody that comes in. And since the beginning, when we had to shut down with everybody else, we have not stopped serving. We've just been doing it a little bit differently.
Wow, yeah, that I mean, great adapting on your part for that. Um, what about for the other programs, like the housing specifically? How has that been affected, if at all?
Well, it's definitely been affected like everybody else. When everyone was quarantined and couldn't go anywhere or do anything, so were the guests that lived in our shelters. Luckily, we have an amazing staff that they were there too. They were quarantined. They were at work, but I feel like, especially the shelter staff that we have, they see it as more than a job because they treat it as more than a job. They're living. I mean, they don't live in the shelter, but they live among those who live in a shelter, and they care about them very deeply. And they wanted to make sure that they were safe and they were taken care of. The shelter staff provides 3 meals a day for the guests that live in the shelter. So the biggest difference in our shelters was that, um, although normally we would have people kind of leave for the day so that they can either whatever they need to do, go to work, look for a job, go to school, whatever that is, there was nowhere that anyone could go. So everyone sort of sheltered in place and the staff took care of what they had to take care of. We had individuals and families living in our shelters, and we still do. And that was kind of the main difference, that just like everyone else, people had to kind of stay put for a while. So that's what happened with the shelters.
Yeah. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but with all these programs and services that you guys do provide, what does your goal boil down to with all these things, going on?
Well, I mean, I said that our kind of mission is to serve hungry and homeless Long Islanders, but our goal, to answer your specific question, is to make sure that the people that we serve get what they need to no longer need our services. So that's basically what we're trying to do, is to give them the support and the services that they need in order not to have to come to a soup kitchen, to not to have to live in a homeless shelter and things like that. So we have social workers on hand, and we have people that are able to sort of give them the tools that they need to become self-sufficient. That's the main goal. Jean Kelly, I talk about Jean Kelly a lot because she's our executive director and was also one of the first volunteers 38 years ago. She often says that we say to guests, we hope we never see you again, because it means that we've given them whatever it is they need to move along with the life that they're supposed to be living without having to depend on us. But we will be there if they need us.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds a little weird, but I understand the sentiment behind it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dana, for joining me for today and for giving me a great inside look on all the wonderful work that the Inn is doing for Long Island. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate it. And, we have our website for any support that anyone would like to give us, theinn.org. You can share that if you'd like.
Yeah,
And I just really appreciate the outlet to let people know about us.
yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.